What's going on, guys? So we're back with more Eddie Brock Carnage with issue 4, where now the Carnage symbiote can't wait to meet Muse after hearing so much about him from Eddie. And aside from that, Eddie and Carnage have their differences that they need to sort out. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, this picks up in Chicago, with Eddie taking Carnage to go after the next target, as a part of their deal to only kill killers. Because after Venom War, when the two of these guys had to bond to stay alive, on one hand, Carnage still wanted to be Carnage and rack up that kill count, while on the other hand, Eddie just met Carnage in the middle and he was like, okay, we can do this, but we're only gonna go after killers. And like we saw in issue 2, Carnage has quite the ambitious list of individuals he wants Eddie to go after. And for Carnage, it's not just about taking these people out, but for many of them, Carnage is considering leaving Eddie to bond with them, if at any point Carnage decides that he would like them to be his new host. And now the thing that's led them to Chicago is their last encounter with Bushwhacker, who was on that list that we just talked about. But after facing Bushwhacker in Detroit, Eddie discovered Bushwhacker was using the fake identity of Detective Chuck Brentwood to hunt down criminals who at some point were arrested at the Detroit precinct. And after his cover was blown, he basically took out everyone who was there. And after Eddie took care of Bushwhacker, to put it gently, he handed over Bushwhacker's files to Bailey Bushkin, who from the start of the series we'd found out that she hired Eddie to get field intel on different serial killers so she could report the new updates on her podcast, which Eddie was just using as a way to find these different killers for him and Carnage to go after. But after looking at Bushwhacker's files, Bailey discovered that he was keeping a murder journal for all the criminals he was hunting, and the next one on that list was not only another serial killer, but it was one who was thought to have been dead for years now, and that killer is Muse. So basically, Eddie's brought Carnage to Chicago to confront Muse for him to either be their next victim or potentially the next host for the Carnage symbiote. And as soon as they get here, Eddie's filling in Carnage along the way as far as the details of who they're after. Because when Carnage asks who are we hunting, Eddie says here, a killer Carnage, just like you wanted. This guy supposedly died back in New York, but Bailey found evidence in Bushwhacker's files that he might still be around. His name is Muse. He's an artist, takes himself pretty seriously, did a lot of street art, protest, murals, graffiti. He incorporated his victims into his work, used their blood for paint. So with hearing this, Carnage is just like, I love that for him, but you said he's dead. And right there, Eddie just looks up at a mural of Muse that says, your Muse has not deserted you. So in response to Carnage mentioning the whole you said he's dead thing, Eddie's just like, yeah, well, we all die sometimes. And now as they continue on their way, we head back over to Bailey Bushkin for a moment, who, like we saw in the last issue, had been paid a surprise visit by FBI agent Winters and Misty Knight, who have both come here looking for Eddie Brock. And at first, Bailey's knee-jerk reaction is asking them if she needs a lawyer. And that just has Misty like, do you think you need a lawyer? Like, do you know something? You did something? So Bailey's like, remind me who you are again? I didn't see your badge. And Misty tells her that's because I didn't show it to you. My name is Misty Knight. I work with the FBI's Aberrant Crimes Division. But that's not exactly why Agent Winters brought me along today. And right there, Bailey can already tell they're being very scarce with details, but even still, she agrees to talk to them without a lawyer, at least for now. But even when Agent Winters asks her if she knows Eddie Brock, she already knows that he knows the answer to that question, since Eddie's credited on her podcast as an investigator. And after that, when Agent Winters asks Bailey how much does she know about his past, this falls right in line with what I assumed before, because Bailey tells him that she knows what was on Eddie's resume, and a little bit more. Because she says here, Eddie used to work for my uncle, Barney Bushkin, at his paper, The Daily Globe. He was just an investigative journalist on the violent crimes beat, serial murders, that kind of thing. My uncle fired Eddie when he blew it on a big story, but it wasn't really his fault. I put out an ad for an investigator when I was starting up this podcast, and Eddie showed up. He turned out to be qualified, and I figured my family owed him, so I gave him the gig. My show's about serial killers, mostly active ones, but cold cases too. I get a lot of leads from my own sources, and Eddie goes into the field and checks them out. So then they ask her if she knows where Eddie is now, and that just has Bailey like, why, is he okay? Which takes us back over to Eddie real quick, in a moment where Carnage wants to make sure that Eddie's okay too. Because right here, Carnage is like, what are we doing? Eddie, wandering around this ugly city, looking at paintings? You're exhausted. I want you to kill. Of course I do. But I don't want you to freeze to death either. When was the last time you ate? So for Eddie, who's kind of out of it right now, and we'll talk more about why, because there's more going on than just the conditions here, but Eddie responds to the question saying that he can't remember the last time he ate. So right away, Carnage does what any responsible yet unhinged symbiote would do. which is reach out into the alley and kill a bunch of rats and eat them, just to make sure they have a bit more energy. And I mean, really, it's not as thoughtful as it might sound, because the last thing any symbiote would want is for their host to not eat and get weak, because that would make the both of them vulnerable. So after eating these Chicago flavored rats, Carnage is like, better? So Eddie says better. And then Carnage tells him, good, if you're going to host me, you have to take care of yourself, Eddie. And I'm just like, there you go, Carnage, let him know you got standards. And back over with Bailey, with her asking if Eddie's okay, neither Agent Winters or Misty Knight know the answer to that question. Because again, they're focused on Eddie's whereabouts right now. So Agent Winters asks Bailey if she's heard from Eddie recently. So she just tells him, okay, look, I come from a family of journalists, so I've had two things drummed into my head since I was a kid. Ask questions and protect your sources. Eddie's not exactly a source, but he's pretty damn close. And so now I'm going to ask a question. Why are you looking into my employee? So Agent Winters asked her about Oceanic Airlines Flight 814 while mentioning they know Eddie Brock was a passenger. And we saw what happened with Flight 814 back in issue 1. But right here, Bailey's just like, oh my god, are you saying he's dead? Which, by the way, this is 100% Bailey acting as if she didn't talk to him after the flight. So when Misty comes back with the you tell us. Right there, Bailey's basically like, okay, enough with the cryptic talk. I'm lawyering up. So she gets her lawyer, Mallory Book, on the phone. Well, I want to say we last saw when we were covering the 2022 She-Hulk series, but Mallory basically tells her not to say another word because she's on her way. And the phone's loud enough for both Misty and Agent Waters to hear. So they both start to leave, but before Misty walks out the door, she slams it shut, locking herself inside with Bailey, so the two of them can have a little chit-chat. But now, back over with Eddie and Carnage, they finally reached their destination. And Eddie tells Carnage here, Muse used old warehouses as his studios back in New York. Stands to reason he might try the same thing here. Bushwhacker analyzed the locations of Muse's street art. This neighborhood is at almost the exact center. We'll try this one first, which makes sense because this place is already screaming signs of a struggle. So they start by checking this place out. And at this point, Carnage can't wait to take a look, so he stretches all the way up to the top to get a peek in through the window. And when he does, Carnage is just like, it's beautiful. And it's like, just going off that, you already know, before even turning the page, that we were getting ready to see something horrific. And Eddie's response is just like, first time, lucky, since this was the first warehouse they checked. But the first thing Carnage notices is that Muse isn't there, because if he were, Carnage would be able to smell him. But even still, Carnage is so excited to see Muse because he's acting like they're about to do a backstage meet and greet and pay $1,000 to take a picture or something. Because Carnage is like, will we wait for him to come back? I can't wait to meet him. I'm excited, Eddie. I'm so excited. And right now, Eddie's just like, yeah, me too. But then Eddie takes them outside just before tossing a couple of vehicles inside, only to then pour gasoline everywhere, which now just has Carnage like, what are you doing, Eddie? Because Carnage is genuinely confused right now. So in a very calm tone, Eddie says, I told you, Carnage, I'm hunting a killer, as he pulls out a lighter and drops it on the gasoline. Just before he goes on to say, the killer's name is Carnage, because the whole way here, Eddie was just luring Carnage into a trap. And it's like we know Eddie's able to keep things from Carnage, even though they're bonded together, and vice versa. Because after Eddie found out that Carnage just took over his body, back when Flight 814 went down, it was after that when we saw Carnage try to break into this restricted area of Eddie's mind. So on both ends, they're definitely keeping secrets from each other. And I'm sure there's more secrets locked away in Eddie's mind aside from this whole setup plan. And by not allowing Carnage to know everything that Eddie knows, as well as a bit of starvation to make them both weak, this allowed Eddie to use Muse as bait so he could catch Carnage off guard and lure him out here. Because Eddie wants Carnage to tell him where he's hidden the passengers of Flight 814, who up until issue 3, Eddie thought they were dead. But now that he knows they're still alive and Carnage is trying to use them as leverage, Eddie's just like, either you tell me where they are now or you and me are going to die in this warehouse. And just to add a little bit more as a quick reminder, like we saw before, Misty Knight's cousin was the air marshal on that flight, which is why Misty's not playing any games with Bailey right now. And even though it seems Misty's just locked her in this room so she can punch the truth out of her again and again. Because right now with Bailey, who's terrified and she's like, hey, I know my rights. She tells Misty that she can't talk without her attorney. But as it turns out, Misty ends up taking a different approach from what Bailey was expecting. Because she tells Bailey Agent Winters can't talk to her because he's working the case. But she can because Misty's just in here as a private citizen having a conversation. And she reminds Bailey, like she tells her, I didn't show you my badge, remember? But this just leads to Misty taking a softer approach, with her telling Bailey that her cousin was on that flight, because Misty genuinely doesn't know if her cousin is still alive or not. And Misty's approach to Bailey is like, she tells her she understands what it's like to be around people who are extremely powerful and or dangerous, and how it can get scary at times, because Misty's been there. So she tells Bailey to not be afraid, either of Eddie or the FBI or liability, and just help her get to the bottom of this so she can find her cousin. And by the time Misty walks out the room, Bailey's attorney, Mallory Book, she's there and she's not happy about Misty talking to her client in private. But at this point, Bailey's told Misty plenty by letting her know that she's talked to Eddie since the plane crash. And the last that Bailey heard, he was in Detroit. So now they're getting closer to catching up with Eddie and Carnage, since that's where they were last before making it to Chicago. But back to Eddie getting ready to cook here, because after luring Carnage into this trap, Carnage is so disappointed that this wasn't a real meet and greet, because he's just like, how dare you? But Eddie goes on to say here, he tells Carnage, you needed to believe we were hunting Muse, or I'd never been able to trap you here. You'd have killed me and found another host. Now you can't. You're still weak from what happened with Meridius and the Necrospear. Even if you killed me, you'd never get past the flames, and we both know it. So Carnage is just like, why would I tell you that? Referring to the details of where those missing passengers are, because Carnage doesn't want to give up that leverage. And for Eddie, who's ready to risk it all, he's just like, well, how's that working for you? And on both ends, neither of these guys are budging. And to make it worse, as this building comes crumbling down, Carnage tries to spin this whole thing to make it sound like this is him winning. Because next he says here, I won't tell you anything, you pathetic human. And when we both die, all those people you're so desperate to save will waste away. They'll die too. They'll all die. My final kills. So Eddie's just like, maybe that's the price. 200 or so lives to make sure you're finally eradicated from this universe, Carnage. So Carnage is like, I don't believe you'll go through with this. You don't want to die. You want to see your idiot child again. You want to make things right. So Eddie's like, I did, until I understood what you did when you took those people. I'm ready to die if it means you will too. The choice is yours. And meanwhile, back over with Bailey. While her attorney is just chewing out Misty and Agent Winters, Bailey's phone rings, and it's Eddie. And she's relieved to hear from him, but Eddie tells her here, Bailey, I need your help. I need you to call the FBI. So she tells him here that that won't be a problem. And then she asks him like, what the hell? What's going on? And Eddie tells her, I know where the missing passengers are from the plane. You have to tell them. I made him tell me. I made him, but it took a lot out of me. As we go back to Eddie, who's barely made it out of that warehouse alive. And I mean, now it's like, well done, Eddie. Pun intended. But yeah, I got a feeling this whole Muse portion of the story isn't quite finished yet. Let me know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.